There is a certain dignity to your life, and protecting that dignity is your responsibility. Yet, in a world brimming with insecure egos and fragile pride, some individuals make it their mission to test that dignity. You know the type. The co-worker who slips in a backhanded remark during a meeting, the friend who cloaks their insult in a joke at dinner, the stranger who sees your calm and mistakes it for weakness. And in that instant, when the laughter fades and silence settles, there's a heat that rises in your chest. You smile, pretending it didn't sting. But deep down a question simmers. Why me? Why do I feel like everyone's favorite target? Here's the truth. It's not about you, it's about them, their need to feel taller by making you feel smaller. In this video, I'll share 6 powerful reasons why some people choose to humiliate others publicly, and more importantly, how Stoicism, the timeless philosophy of inner strength and self-mastery, gives you the tools to rise above it. No yelling, no dramatic confrontations, no revenge plots, just the steady, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let others define you. So, if you're ready to stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, if you're done swallowing your pride in silence, then stay with me. Leave a comment with yes to let me know you're ready. Subscribe, hit that bell, and let's begin. Part 1. They want control. Humiliation is one of the oldest tools of manipulation. It's subtle, calculated, and devastating. It doesn't always come in loud voices or slammed doors. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it sounds like sarcasm. Other times it's framed as just being honest. But make no mistake, its intention is to shrink you, to bend you, to make you question your worth in front of others, so the one delivering the blow can feel, for a moment, taller. They may not call it control, but that's exactly what it is. Think about it. When someone makes a cutting remark in public, when they air a private detail you trusted them with, or interrupt your voice in a room where you've barely spoken, it's rarely random. There's a strategy behind it. Because when you're made small in the eyes of others, when you freeze in humiliation, you hand them something precious. Your power. I remember it clearly. A team meeting. I had worked for weeks on an idea, thoughtful, refined, full of potential. I presented it with quiet confidence, eager to contribute, to build something meaningful with the team. But before I could finish, a colleague, the kind who always seemed to speak louder when someone else was shining, cut me off with a sarcastic jab. It got a few awkward chuckles, the kind of laughter that doesn't come from humor, but from tension. And just like that, the idea I'd nurtured, the courage I had summoned to share, collapsed inward. I felt the blood rush to my face, that familiar heat of public embarrassment. My first instinct was to defend myself, to explain, to prove I belonged in that room. But then something in me, call it intuition or maybe wisdom I'd been learning, told me not to. Because the trap was not in what she said. The trap was in how I chose to respond. If I had tried to justify myself, I would have been playing by her rules. That's when I remembered one of the core teachings of Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. It's not just a quote. It's a compass. Because when someone tries to humiliate you, their weapon isn't their words. It's your belief in those words. Their power isn't in the insult, it's in whether or not you buy it. You see, the person who humiliates others is often trying to wrestle with something they can't face within themselves. They feel powerless in their own life. They're struggling with invisible battles, fear, insecurity, regret. But instead of confronting those wounds, instead of healing, they reach for the fastest path to dominance. Make someone else feel small. If they can reduce you in front of others, they don't have to confront their own inadequacy. And the more public the stage, the more powerful they feel. But here's where Stoicism offers a profound shift. When someone humiliates you, you don't fight them. You don't match their low energy with equal venom. You rise above, not because you're weak, but because you are rooted. because you understand the deeper truth. Their words cannot shape you unless you give them permission. The moment you stop internalizing their message, the moment you stop thinking, maybe they're right about me, is the moment they lose control. Because a person who is anchored in self-respect is immune to manipulation. It's not that they don't hear the insult, they simply don't own it. Imagine trying to throw mud on a wall of glass. It doesn't stick, it slides, it falls away. That's what happens when you've mastered your mind. You don't argue with lies, you simply refuse to live by them. And it's not just Stoic theory, this is backed by psychology. When someone uses humiliation as a weapon, they're often projecting a distorted self-image. They want you to reflect their inner chaos, so they feel less alone in it. But when you remain calm, composed, and dignified, you force them to confront something terrifying, that you are not theirs to break. And that realization, more than any clever comeback, shakes them. So if you remember nothing else from this part, remember this. Humiliation only works when you believe you deserve it. And you don't. You never did. The ones who use shame to control others are telling you everything about them. But how you respond, that tells the world everything about you. Will you lash out, or will you remain grounded? Will you try to prove your worth, or will you calmly remember that your worth isn't up for debate? That is the Stoic way. Power not through dominance, but through clarity. Strength not through aggression, but through mastery of self. Because in the end, no one can take from you what you've decided is already yours. Your voice, your dignity, your peace. Part 2. They sense weakness. Some people walk into a room like predators. They don't announce themselves. They don't roar. They don't make a scene. Instead, they observe, quietly, carefully, like wolves watching the herd, waiting for a sign. The smallest tremble, a flicker of doubt, a drop of the eyes. Because what they're looking for is weakness. Not the kind of weakness you see in a broken body or a lost opportunity, but something more subtle, more dangerous, a crack in your sense of self. The moment you hesitate, the second you shrink yourself, the instant you laugh at a joke that isn't funny, especially when it's at your expense, that's when they strike. Maybe with a harmless comment in the middle of a group conversation. Maybe with a joke so carefully worded it gives them deniability while leaving you stung and silent. And if you let it pass, if you sit there frozen in discomfort, smiling through your confusion, pretending it's all good, you've given them something. Permission. Permission to go further next time. Permission to test the limits of your silence. Permission to chip away at your dignity, because you just told them without words that you'll take it. I remember that lesson personally. Early in my career, I had a manager who didn't raise his voice, but his words carried sharp edges, the kind that find your hidden bruises, your secret insecurities, and press, ever so casually. Maybe this project's a little advanced for you. Don't worry, we'll let you catch up later. Always said with a smirk, always in front of others, always framed like a joke. And everyone laughed, including me, because at the time I thought staying silent was noble. I told myself, don't be dramatic. I rationalized. He probably didn't mean it like that, but deep down it hurt. And here's what I eventually realized. He did mean it, not by accident, not casually. He was testing how far he could go. And every time I said nothing, every time I swallowed my pride and let it slide, I was training him and everyone else in the room to treat me like less. That was the turning point for me. Because when I finally discovered Stoicism, it wasn't some cold, detached idea of emotional suppression. It was power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You can't stop people from trying to humiliate you. You can't control the words they choose, or the setting they choose to say them in. But you can decide whether their words define you. You can choose whether their attempt to make you small finds anything in you that believes it. That's where the battle is. Not out there, but in here. The hard truth is this. If you do not respect yourself, no one else will. And when you tolerate humiliation, when you allow it to pass in silence, you're not just allowing it, you're inviting it. Not because you deserve it, but because you've signaled you'll accept it. Humans test hierarchies, consciously or not. It's built into us. So when someone pushes and you don't push back, not with aggression, but with clear presence, they keep pushing. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of habit. And they keep going until you stop them. Stoicism taught me this. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it's as simple and as powerful as not laughing at the joke, as holding eye contact when they expect you to look away, as calmly removing yourself from rooms where you are not respected without apology, without explanation. That's Stoic strength. Not because it's emotionless, but because it's disciplined. It's the difference between needing the room to like you and needing to like yourself when you leave the room. And here's what happens when you start living that way. People feel it. Those who used to test you pause. They sense a boundary they hadn't noticed before. They move on because they're looking for easy prey, and you're not prey anymore. That shift, that quiet power, is not just about earning respect from others. It's about earning it from yourself. You begin to trust your own strength. You begin to realize that you don't have to control the world, just your response to it. That is the true gift of Stoicism. Not a wall to keep pain out, but armor to move through life with dignity, upright, grounded, and unshaken. Part 3. You haven't set boundaries. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you said enough and meant it? When was the last time you stopped laughing at the joke that cut too close? When was the last time you looked someone in the eye and silently, without raising your voice, communicated, "You don't get to treat me like that"? Because here's what most people don't realize. Disrespect doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it grows from your silence. Not all people who push you are evil, but all of them are testing something. And when you don't make the rules clear, they will write their own. Sometimes it starts small, a joke at your expense, a casual disregard for your time, a dismissive tone in conversation. You tell yourself, it's not worth the trouble. And maybe the first time it isn't. But what happens when it becomes a pattern? What happens when you've said nothing so many times that they begin to think there's nothing to say no to? That's when it becomes dangerous. You look around and realize you're living in an environment where your boundaries don't exist. Not because others stole them, but because you never clearly set them in the first place. Respect has left the room, and in its place, familiarity, disregard, assumption. And perhaps the worst part, they think it's okay. Because you trained them by staying silent that it is. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That sounds harsh, doesn't it? But it's a razor-sharp truth. Because the moment you start setting boundaries, clear, unapologetic, firm, people will misunderstand you. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're cold, distant, even arrogant, especially the ones who were quite happy benefiting from your lack of boundaries. But let me be very clear. If you want peace, you cannot keep chasing approval. You have to choose. Approval is a moving target. Peace is still. Peace is knowing where you stand and staying there, even if you stand alone. Look at Oprah Winfrey. Early in her career, working as a young reporter, she was told she wasn't cut out for television. Her producers criticized her weight, her voice, her presence, everything that made her her. There was pressure to change, to mold herself into the version of a woman that was considered acceptable for the screen. She could have folded. Many would have, but she didn't. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She didn't perform. She simply drew a line. And when they couldn't respect that line she walked, she lost the job. But she kept her self-respect, and that made all the difference. Oprah understood something most people never learn until it's too late. It is better to be rejected for who you truly are than celebrated for who you pretended to be. That is Stoicism in practice. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about inviting the right people to come close and letting the rest fall away. Yes, it might feel lonely at first, but solitude, when rooted in self-respect, is not weakness. It is power. It is strength wrapped in silence. It is clarity without compromise. And here's the beautiful irony. Once you begin living with boundaries, the world adjusts. The people who stay respect them. The ones who don't were never safe to begin with. And in that space, the space you protect by saying no more, you begin to breathe again. You begin to remember who you are, that you are not here to be everyone's cushion. You are not here to be liked by all. You are here to live with dignity. You are here to speak truth, calmly. You are here to walk into a room without explaining why your boundaries exist, because the people who are meant to walk beside you will never ask you to leave your self-respect at the door. And those who do, let them go. As the Stoics remind us again and again, what is outside your control is none of your concern. But how you choose to live, how you choose to draw the line, that is everything. Part 4. They sense you don't know your own worth. There's a kind of pain that doesn't bleed. It doesn't scream. It doesn't ask for attention. But it lingers, quiet, constant. It's the pain of not knowing who you are. And that pain, that inner uncertainty, is exactly what some people are looking for when they decide to humiliate you. They can sense it. Like wolves smell weakness, like storms find cracks in walls. Some people have a radar for self-doubt, not because you say it out loud, but because you carry it. In your silence, in your body language, in the way you hesitate before you speak. You don't know your worth yet. And they do. Not because they're wise, but because they've seen this before. Maybe in themselves. Maybe in others they've broken. But here's the part that hurts most. They strike not because you're powerless, but because you haven't claimed your power yet. And that makes you vulnerable. You become a mirror, a reflection of everything they've buried. And they don't want to help you rise, they want to keep you down. Because if you rise, if you realize your own value, they lose control. Epictetus said it with brutal honesty. No man is free who is not master of himself. Most people think freedom is status, or wealth, or independence. But true freedom, the kind Stoics wrote about, begins with one thing: self-mastery. And self-mastery begins with knowing who you are. Because when you don't, you bend to opinions. You chase approval. You believe that every joke at your expense is truth, that every insult is a verdict. And worst of all, you become addicted to external validation without even realizing it. But once you know your worth, once you've defined it internally, not through applause or attention, everything changes. Insults become noise. Mockery loses its sting. Even praise doesn't shake you, because your self-respect no longer depends on anyone else seeing it. You carry it with you, like armor, not to hide, but to walk with dignity. One of the most powerful examples of this, Eleanor Roosevelt. As a young girl, she was ridiculed, even by her own family. Her mother called her granny because she didn't fit the standards of beauty expected of women at the time. She lost both parents at a young age, was raised in an environment that constantly made her feel small. She could have let that early humiliation define her. She could have chosen silence. But instead she chose growth. Through reflection, through education, through purpose. She built herself not around others' expectations, but around her own values. As First Lady, she was mocked, criticized, demeaned for her activism, her opinions, even her appearance. But by then she had already done the inner work. She had already decided who she was. And because of that, their words had nowhere to land. That's the power of knowing your worth. It doesn't silence the critics. It just renders them powerless. Stoicism teaches this truth over and over again. No one can humiliate you without your permission, because humiliation doesn't come from the outside. It's not in their words, it's in your interpretation of those words. And that interpretation is something you own. You don't fight back by shouting louder. You don't prove your worth by begging to be seen. You rise above by deciding that their approval isn't the source of your identity. That's the Stoic mindset. That's real strength. And yes, it takes work. It takes honesty. It takes nights where you ask yourself the hard questions. Who am I without their validation? What do I stand for when no one is watching? What is my value, not on the market, not in the mirror, but in my soul? And when you answer that, when you define yourself from the inside out, you become unshakable. The same people who once tried to humiliate you lose interest, because their power relied on your insecurity. And now, you're no longer insecure, you're anchored. Not perfect, not arrogant, just solid. You know who you are, and because of that, the game is over. So here's the truth. Some people will try to humiliate you. Some will test you. Some will envy you. Some will gather a crowd and try to turn your silence into shame. But none of them can take from you what you claim for yourself. And from this day forward, let this be your quiet revolution. You no longer beg for respect. You command it with presence, with calm, and when needed with silence. Because you know your worth. And when you do, you become untouchable. Not because the world is kind, but because you are strong. Part 5. They seek an audience. Let's tell the truth here. Humiliation almost never happens in private. Why? Because humiliation, like performance, needs a crowd. The ones who humiliate you don't just want to hurt your pride, they want witnesses. They want an audience. Not to support them, but to validate them, to give their cruelty meaning, to wrap their insecurity in a cloak of laughter or silence. Because without the crowd, their words feel hollow, their actions feel weak. Their ego is exposed for what it truly is. Fragile, afraid, and in need of applause. Think back. Maybe it was in a conference room when someone in charge cut down a colleague, not because they made a mistake, but because it was a chance to remind everyone who held the power. Maybe it was in school when a group ganged up on the quiet kid, not because he did anything wrong, but because he was alone. Or maybe it was you. Maybe you felt it, the sting of being laughed at, not because you were ridiculous, but because someone needed a target and you weren't surrounded by anyone willing to stop them. That's how bullies work. They don't choose you because you're weak. They choose you because you're isolated. Because when you stand alone, you're easier to push. And when others watch in silence, it amplifies the humiliation. Not because the crowd agrees with your attacker, but because the crowd is afraid. And fear silences the decent. There's a psychological term for this: individuation. It's the process by which people in a group lose their sense of personal responsibility. In a crowd, they go quiet when they should speak. They laugh when they don't want to. They freeze, not because they're cruel, but because they're scared that they might be next. And the person doing the humiliating? They know this. They use it. Their cruelty becomes performance art, a public demonstration of power, built not on truth, not on strength, but on fear. And yet, here's what the Stoics teach us. What looks like power is often weakness in disguise. A person who must rally a crowd to their side in order to belittle another is already telling you something important. They don't know how to stand on their own. They don't trust their worth without the echo of applause. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, understood this better than most. He was surrounded by senators, generals, nobles who bowed when he entered the room. But even with all that reverence, he never used humiliation to assert dominance. He never needed to, because he knew something that modern society often forgets. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. The crowd's applause, the laughter of those too afraid to stand up, it's meaningless. Their silence doesn't define you. Their chuckles don't condemn you. And their fear? That's not your burden to carry. Let me tell you this as clearly as I can. When someone tries to humiliate you publicly, their power doesn't come from their voice. It comes from how you respond. It comes from whether you believe you are alone. But here's the shift. You're not, because real strength isn't found in who stands with you when it's easy. It's found in you when no one else will. When you hold your ground. When you look back at the one trying to shame you, not with anger but with clarity, that unshakable calm that says, I see what you're doing, and I am not moved. That is power. That is dignity. That is what Stoicism teaches. That you don't need an audience to validate your worth. You don't need a crowd to echo your truth. You only need your own steady mind, your own clear values, and the discipline to stand firm even when the room goes quiet, even when the world looks away. Because the one who humiliates others to gain control, they are never as strong as they pretend to be. And the one who walks away with dignity intact, without needing to prove anything, that's the one with real strength. So the next time the crowd laughs or the room falls silent, let them. You owe them nothing, not an explanation, not a performance, not a piece of yourself. Just walk tall, and let the silence say what words never could, that you are not afraid to stand alone. Part 6. They envy you. There's a hard truth many people never want to admit, not to others, and certainly not to themselves. Sometimes people try to humiliate you because they envy you, not because you're flawed, not because you've done something wrong, but because there's something about you, your presence, your integrity, your quiet confidence, that exposes what they've abandoned in themselves. And rather than rise to meet that standard, they choose the easier path, tear you down. See, envy isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up with jealousy or overt resentment. Sometimes it shows up in the form of humor, a snide comment dressed as sarcasm, a whisper behind your back. Other times it's a public jab, calculated to chip away at your confidence in front of others. And it's confusing, because you haven't harmed them. You've never been anything but yourself. So why the attack? Why do they want to make you feel small? The answer is deeply human and deeply painful, because you remind them of something they lost. Your growth reveals their stagnation. Your peace reflects their chaos. Your courage to be real shines a light on the parts of them still hiding. It's not really you they hate. It's the contrast. Psychologists call this malicious envy, and it's not the same as harmless comparison. We all feel envy from time to time. It's normal. But malicious envy is darker. It turns admiration into attack. It turns the person you once looked up to into your critic. It turns colleagues into competitors, friends into rivals, strangers into saboteurs. And it thrives in silence, in shame, in confusion, because it leaves you wondering, did I do something to deserve this? No, you didn't. In fact, the very reason they try to humiliate you is because they know, deep down, that you're not easily broken, that you are not weak, and that terrifies them, because your strength reminds them of everything they've neglected to cultivate in themselves. Your self-respect forces them to face the compromises they've made. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." These are people who may have everything, titles, money, influence, yet live in spiritual poverty. Their soul is starving, so they strike, not to correct you, not to keep you humble, but to dull the light you carry. Because in that light they feel seen, exposed, and rather than seek their own source of power, they do what's easiest, try to destroy yours. I've seen this happen more times than I care to admit. The moment someone begins to rise in their work, their purpose, their character, suddenly the whispers begin. He's changed. She thinks she's better than us now. And if you're not grounded in who you are, those words can work their way into your mind like poison. You start shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You apologize for your ambition. You second-guess your values. But here's the shift. When you understand that their attacks come from lack, not truth, you stop taking it personally. You begin to see their behavior for what it truly is. A cry for validation, a mask for insecurity, a mirror of their own dissatisfaction. And suddenly the shame you once felt begins to dissolve. You stop carrying their bitterness like a burden. You stop shrinking your presence to fit their comfort zone. You no longer dim your light just so they won't feel the glare. Because, as Stoicism teaches, you are not responsible for another person's discomfort in the presence of your truth. Your only responsibility is to live with clarity, with virtue, and with respect for yourself first. And when you do that, something sacred happens. You become untouchable, not because people stop trying to hurt you, but because they no longer know where to land the blow. Their arrows pass through air, their words echo into silence. They realize, often too late, that the strength they envied was never something they could take from you, because it was never given by them. It was earned, in silence, built over time, rooted in truth. So the next time someone tries to humiliate you, pause, breathe, and remember, it says more about what they've lost than about who you are. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to explain yourself. Just keep standing where you are in your light, in your truth, in your quiet, grounded power. Because real strength isn't loud. It doesn't humiliate. It radiates. And no one can take that from you unless you hand it over. So now you know. The ones who humiliate you do it not because you're weak, but because they hope you don't realize how powerful you actually are. Some will test your silence. Some will envy your light. Others will gather an audience, hoping the echo of laughter will drown your dignity. But here's the truth you carry forward from this moment on. No one gives you worth, no one grants you dignity, no one defines you unless you hand them the pen. From now on, you write your story. And you write it not with noise, not with anger, but with calm strength, with boundaries, with clarity, with the quiet power that says, I know who I am. I don't need you to confirm it. That is Stoicism. That is mastery. And that is freedom. If this message resonated with you, if you felt even one sentence speak directly to your current season in life, leave a comment with the word unshakable below. Let it be a signal, a reminder, a commitment. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Tap that bell, because every week I share new perspectives grounded in ancient wisdom built for modern strength. Remember this: the world doesn't give you dignity, you give it to yourself. And once you do, no one, and I mean no one, can take it away. I'm glad you watched. Stay strong, stay still, and I'll see you in the next video.